I want to look at two chapters in Revelation today, chapters 4 and 5. Sometimes life does get messy and we're grappling with everyday challenges, and sometimes our image of God slips a bit, and we don't think of him as the all-powerful being, because we don't seem to be getting any help. And I would like to look at these two chapters here, because that's Revelation 4 and 5. And of course God understands all this. He knows the way we are as human beings. But in chapter 4 here, we'll read chapter 4 in a moment, but John is, in a sense, eavesdropping. He's invited up through into heaven, and he hears things that nobody has heard before. We'll read chapter 4, and then we can deal with 5 after that. After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and before me was a throne in heaven, with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. A rainbow resembling an emerald encircled the throne. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings and peals of thunder. Before the throne 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. Also before the throne there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. In the centre, around the throne, were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had the face like a man, the fourth was like a flying eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under his wings. Day and night they never stopped saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Whenever the living creatures give glory, honour and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the throne and say, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honour and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being." And the word "for" there, of course, can be translated because you have created all things. So we are, in a sense, we are like flies on the wall when we read into these scriptures. And we're looking at a scene of great beauty, as well as of great significance, for our understanding of God, the God we serve, as well as of the world and of ourselves. And like all eavesdroppers, we may hear things that we may not want to hear. The scene is set, as we read there in Revelation 4 and 5, and some people do find the picture confusing because of the symbols that are used. I think in our fellowship we do have more insight into that, but no one, we understand many of the symbols, but no one understands the symbols perfectly. No one understands them all. And this vision isn't a photograph of what it's like in heaven. It's more like a map, and once we understand the symbols that are used, it's more useful than a photograph. With symbols, we shouldn't try to imagine the scene literally. The lion, which is also a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes, it stretches our imagination as far as it will go. In fact, beyond our imagination. We have to get into John's mind and understand what he wanted to say using these symbols. And the first thing we see sets the context for what is to follow. Verse 2, which we read there. John was in the Spirit, and there was someone sitting on the throne. He doesn't, even with symbols, he doesn't attempt to describe the person on the throne, God. He doesn't attempt to describe him, but he talks about what the throne looks like. But the fact that this great being is enthroned tells us something very important. He is absolutely sovereign. He is absolutely sovereign. He is king. And the sight wouldn't be just awe-inspiring, and John would have found it that way, because remember in Revelation 1 when he was in the Spirit, that he heard this voice and he turned and saw the risen Christ in his glory, and he just collapsed. So if we couldn't even look on this throne as a human being, unless, like John, we were given the vision, we were allowed to see that. But the figure is surrounded by beautiful jewels and of wonderful colours and a rainbow. And here John is reminding us that this is the same God as revealed to Noah and Ezekiel. The God who makes promises and, out of love, and he keeps them. The God who keeps them. And great power and majesty are indicated here. Tremendous power and majesty. The 24 elders on their thrones, they cast their crowns down in worship. And we read what they said there in verse 11, and their worship follows the song which the living creatures sing. They say, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, who was and is to come." And then the elders say, "Worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honour and power. For you did create all things," or because you created all things, and because of your will they existed and were created. Scientists and anthropologists have often asked themselves, what is it that humans can do that computers can't do? I don't know if you've ever pitted yourself against a computer to play chess or anything like that. But a computer can beat a human being at chess, although some of the masters did beat computers in the past, but with the advances in computer technology, I don't know if that's still the case. I haven't heard of any of the acclaimed masters saying that, or accepting a challenge, or laying down a challenge to a computer to play them. But certainly computers can do all sorts of things we can't do. The speed of calculation and all that, they can project ahead and work out things, and we were still puzzling away after years. So some people actually declare that although computers can't at present do everything that we can do, it's only a matter of time. And of course, a writer, David Lodge, his name is, he wrote a book entitled Thinks. And the heroine eventually discovers the answer to this. And it is that humans can weep and humans can forgive, which is a spiritual element there, which a computer cannot do. Two very powerful human activities. If they take place in a different dimension from anything a computer can do, and without them we would be less than human, if we couldn't weep or we couldn't forgive. A similar question, what can humans do that animals can't do? And again, some scientists have tried to insist that we're just like naked apes, maybe a more sophisticated version of an ape. But this is a trickier question. But in the section we're reading, the main difference is that humans can say the word because. Because. They can say it about God himself. And notice the creatures, the seraphim, are representing animals, the animal kingdom and all that. Let's see, you have the lion there, king of the beasts, majestic looking animal. The ox, massive leader of the tamed animals. The eagle, undisputed leader of the birds. And they, represented by the seraphim, they don't say because. They worship God. They're beautiful creatures. All animals and creatures, insects, birds, were created for a purpose. They're noble. They're beautiful. And they worship God the way they were meant to. But they don't say why they worship God. But human beings take up their worship and they then say, because you created all things. An animal doesn't do that. Yet an animal is praising God. Bird is praising God by being what it is. When I look at plants and beautiful roses, and you see a bud that gradually opens with the warmth and the heat of the sun and the light, and then it opens, and it's praising God. It releases its perfume. The bee comes in, samples the nectar, and there is the praise of God. And it isn't reasoning. Why am I praising God? And an animal is the same with an animal. Fish, great whales in the oceans. The blue whale, you can put a whole lot of buses on top of it. A huge noble creature. And sadly, human beings have destroyed so many of these. So many of them. Yes, the song of the animals in nature is one of adoring praise. It's an act of adoring praise. And we are meant to see with the psalmist. And as David, had great insight into nature, into all these things we can see. And we'll look at one or two of these psalms just to see that. Psalm 8, for example. You can keep your finger in Revelation, of course. Psalm 8. And verse 3, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the son of man that you care for him? You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. And of course, we know that we don't control everything because of sin. God hasn't allowed us to, but it says in verse 6, you made him ruler over the works of your hands, you put everything under his feet. In Hebrews it says we don't yet see that. But yeah, just imagine we were given the job of being stewards over creation, stewards, looking after it, nurturing it, keeping it controlled in a good way, balanced way, which Adam and Eve were supposed to do. They relinquished that by sinning. And other beings stepped in to do that. Satan and the demons. And you hear the old pagan gods mentioned, and of course the pagans worship these demons and Satan. And we see where the world is. The people have been infected with this, and there is that sort of a destructive attitude or bent in human beings. And some people will say, not every human being is like that because God has enlightened many. But there many are. And we see that in the way the nations have behaved, the way Syria carries on, destroys its own people. And many other nations do the same. Cruel, oppressive rulers. and they don't think anything of raping an area. The Roman Empire raped North Africa, the Atlas Mountains. There used to be trees right up around there and wonderful crops, and Rome took all that, shipped it back to keep the Caesars happy. All the food, they stripped it. They did the same in Palestine, and they did it in many places in the Mediterranean, where their rule ran, where their writ ran. They did that. So, but you can see there is a couple of these psalms here which are wonderful. Let's see, 96. Psalm 96. Let's see. Yes, we talk about creation rejoice. Let the heavens rejoice, verse 11. Verse 11, let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let the sea resound and all that's in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Then all the trees of the forest will sing for joy. Do the trees sing when the wind is storm level, or when a gentle breeze is wafting across the mountain slopes and you hear the leaves rustling? Is that worship? It says, let the trees of the forest sing for joy. They will sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. Psalm 98, just over a wee bit. Let the sea resound and everything in it. Remember, God set the boundary for the sea, that it wouldn't come after the flood, and that he promised he wouldn't flood the earth again. And he set a boundary, and the sea comes up and crashes down on the shore. And you can hear that thunder. If you're near, there's a place up at Whitehead, and there are caves you can go into, or big hollows in the rock. And when the tide's coming in, you can hear smashing and echoing and the booming way up at the end of that cave, you know. And is the sea worshipping God and saying, we are not passing the boundary? It's really wonderful. Let the rivers clap their hands, let the mountains sing for joy. When there are thunder and lightning storms on the mountain, Everest, for example, where climbers are caught in these terrible storms, and away up at those heights, up in the 20,000 feet, up to near 30,000 feet, there's a shortage of oxygen there, and climbers have died. They just haven't found them, and years later they might find them, where they just couldn't exist any longer. So these are really wonderful. Psalm 104. I don't want to spend too long on these. And verse 25, verse 24, how many are your works, O Lord? In wisdom you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. There is the sea vast and spacious, teeming with creatures beyond number, living things both large and small. And of course, in verse 27, these all look to you to give them their food at the proper time. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they're satisfied with good things. Wonderful words here. I hope we read these because they're very inspiring. And they add to our worship. They do. And creation worships God. And those representing mankind, the 24 elders represent human beings. And they say, yeah, you deserve to receive glory and honor because you created all things. And it's the because that distinguishes humans from other animals. Animals are noble creatures, wonderful creatures, and the way they treat their young is it's human beings could look and learn, and we ought to know better, where little children are abused and reared in homes of cruelty. Yeah, human beings are given the capacity to reflect, to understand what's going on, and in particular to express that understanding in worship. And we were made for worship. And our worship isn't always just singing, but being what we were created to be. Because God has given gifts to every one of you, to every human being. Are we using those things, or do we let them lie fallow? Because if we let them lie fallow, we're not praising God the way we could. So worship with a cause in it is what marks us out as genuine human beings, because we see the reason we're worshipping. We're made in God's image, male and female. Do we allow our thinking about God to inform our praise and our worship? Do we think through the fact that he deserves glory, honour and power because of what he has done? Do we think through it? And this may seem rather obvious, but it's anything but obvious. The world is full of movements, systems, philosophies and religions that have ignored creation as something shabby and irrelevant to spiritual things. And the Greeks did this, and there are those today who seek a spiritual experience. And they think, the body, you shove it off like you would a butterfly shoving off the chrysalis, and the spirit then soars to where it should be among the stars. That's not what God has in mind, that sort of thing. Not at all. And sometimes they worship the world, of course. Money, sex, power, war. They think they can get by taking. They can have by taking what belongs to somebody else. But brethren, the problems within creation requires the Creator to act decisively to put things right. Not because creation is bad, because it's good. And God said it was good. And we read in the scriptures that he's going to renew it. He's angry with the forces that have corrupted and defaced it, with the destroyers, which threatens to destroy it, and many do. In chapter 11 of Revelation, chapter 11, the end of one of these verses here, chapter 11. And at the verse 18, the nations, this is where Christ is going to actually do something at the proper time. The nations were angry and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants the prophets and your saints and those who reverence your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. God will destroy those who destroy the earth. And John has shared with us a picture of God so big and terrible, we couldn't look on it, that we're forced to ask, is this really the God we believe in? Sometimes we reduce God to the God we want. One we would be comfortable with. We wouldn't be so critical. It doesn't demand such high standards. But the way to faith is always down the road of an enlarged view of God. Because we cannot give God enough credit. Our minds, we're not capable of it. We can envisage so much. And then, he's beyond that. He's beyond that. The things he has created, this here seems solid. It isn't solid. It's made up of atoms. We can't go through it. God can go through it. Christ went through it, walked through the wall, through the doors. Blake, I think it was, wrote a poem, a very short one, but he said that the whole world is in a grain of sand. The whole world is in a grain of sand. And if you think about the tiny things that we can't see, an atom, a molecule, And with these electron or microscope things, they can go in to these micro items, like atoms and things, and they are a world in themselves. And God is such a being that he inhabits the universe, which is, no one knows how big, and he can also fit inside a molecule. Because God isn't a physical being. Spirit. God is spirit. And the creation is wonderful. Beautiful and wonderful. And we need to give God the glory. We need to see God as God, with all power, all authority. He's so magnificently beautiful and almighty that our minds have difficulty envisaging him, and that's it. But yet we can envisage him to a great extent. And he will allow us to see more and more of himself. He'll reveal more of himself to us as we walk with him. But if we understand his greatness, we never need to fear anything. Remember, one of the most used phrases in the Bible is, fear not. Don't be afraid. John collapsed when he saw the resurrected Christ in chapter 1 of Revelation. What did Christ say? Don't be afraid. Fear not. And always you find God saying that to human beings, don't be afraid. And if we're in tune and in harmony with God and obeying him, we've nothing to fear. We've nothing to fear. Without this enhanced and enlarged view of God, the God we worship shrinks into an idol. If we don't try to see and think about God through his creation and through what he reveals of himself, through Christ as well. And that idol that we can find ourselves worshipping is just a product of our imagination. A product of our imagination. And that God is no use. That sort of God. Daniel's friends understood God's power. You remember Nebuchadnezzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, tongue twisters. They wouldn't bow down and worship the image, the golden image. He said, I'll throw you into the fire. They said, okay, our God's able to deliver us. They threw them in. Nebuchadnezzar looked, and there were 4 people in the fire. One of them like the Son of Man. And they pulled them out of the fire, and there wasn't the smell of smoke on them. And the furnace had been heated 7 times. And those who threw them in, I think they were burned up. They knew that God had this power. Daniel knew that. So, brethren, so far in our eavesdropping, we have seen a great vision of God. And in chapter 5, we hear something which touches us personally. We'll just read through chapter 5 here. Then I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept, because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain. Some translations have it bearing the marks of crucifixion. Standing in the centre of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders, he had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He came and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne, and when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals. Notice, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom of priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and elders, and in a loud voice they sang, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honour and glory and praise. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them singing, To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honour and glory and power forever and ever. The 4 living creatures said Amen, and the elders fell down and worshipped. Now it's an amazing chapter. Those 2 chapters are really amazing chapters. In the right hand of the figure on the throne is the sealed scroll. God holds out the book which contains his perfect plan for the righteous and holy ruling of the earth. God doesn't act directly, notice. It appears that he has purposed that his will should be carried out by a person or people other than himself. And that's the problem from John's point of view. Who on earth is worthy to implement God's will? To act as his right-hand man in ruling the world? Who? And it looks for a moment that, bound by his own decree, God will never vindicate truth and justice. And John weeps. It looks as if the world will end up in futility. But someone can open the book. If we find the vision of God bewildering and yet awe-inspiring, anyone reading this for the first time will certainly feel the same of this picture of Jesus Christ, because he's the Lion of Judah, the sovereign one from the tribe which God said the ruler would come. Genesis 49, remember? From the root of David, Jesse, the man after God's own heart. Do we expect to see a warrior standing who will sweep all enemies out of his road? No, we see a lamb. One bearing the marks of crucifixion. Remember, he showed them to his disciples. He said, put your hand in. Thomas didn't. Yet the Lamb is alive again and has been given all power and authority. Matthew 28, remember? All power and authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me. Therefore, go. So he is the authority. He tells us he's our Lord, he's our Master. We need to listen to him. So the Lion of Judah won the victory by being the Lamb who was sacrificed, because the enemies that were to be defeated were sin and death, and of course the usurper, the originator of sin anyway was Satan, and he at the end will be dealt with. And of course the Lion defeated death by dying as a lamb. He died to take away sin, and to human beings that seems the end of things. But it wasn't. Third day, Christ was raised. And he died to take away sin. He took the full weight of that on himself. On himself. He died because he refused to submit to Satan and to sin. He didn't submit. He and he alone is worthy. And at this point we have reached the eavesdropper's dilemma. Have you ever eavesdropped on a conversation? When you're younger, sometimes you're maybe upstairs and you're coming down, or you're in another room and you're coming out, and you stop because your mum and dad maybe are having a conversation. and you listen, because they might stop talking about it if you go in. It may be interesting. And then suddenly it's about you, and you don't feel so comfortable. Well, this is a bit like that. In, let's see, verses 9 and 10, yeah. This Bible, the verse numbers are not at the edge, so I have to look around and see where they are. Verse 9, they sang a new song, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom of priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth." So he's talking about us, human beings, talking about us. The new song, and this is about what Christ did, and it's about us. And Christ purchased humans for God, bought them. He came into the slave market. Remember, was it Hosea? I think it was, yeah. God told her to marry a harlot, and he did. She had children to him, but she committed adultery. She went with other men, and she ended up in the slave market. And then God says, "Go and buy her back and show your love to her." And Micah went to the slave market and bought her for 15 shekels of silver and something else. Well, that's what Christ did. He went down to the slave market and he bought us, bought all human beings, paid the price to redeem them. And this isn't something he has to do again and again. The price was paid once. Hebrews 9:26. He doesn't have to be sacrificed again and again. It was a one-only sacrifice, unique. So this sacrifice, this redemption, covers all human beings. No one is excluded. We don't have to be born a Jew. And it used to be, if you weren't a Jew, sorry, you have no access to the inner area. No, the kingdom is open, the seals are all broken. No barrier, colour, race, social status, nothing. All human beings. No matter what colour your skin, Christ purchased us for God to be kings and priests to serve him. It's a dual role, just as Christ is a dual role. The high priest and king. And we also have a dual role. We represent the whole of creation, giving voice to their praise and worship. In Exodus 19, Exodus 19, verses 4 to 6. God was talking to Moses here. "You yourselves have seen what I did in Egypt, or to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. Dual role, brethren. The dual role ties in exactly with Christ's role as the regal lion and the sacrificial lamb. Ties in with it. We are given these tasks solely by virtue of what he has done. Nothing we have done. Nothing we have done. What are we to do as eavesdroppers? We've heard this. The eavesdropping has to stop. Because he knows we're there anyway. He knows we have read it. He knows we understand what he's saying. We must come out of hiding. If we have been trying to evade the responsibility God lays on us through the gifts he gives us. It's no use, brethren. We need to start doing what we should be doing. And that's praising him by being what he wants us to be. And of course, the church is praising Christ the Redeemer. And are we going to remain silent? We have to join in the song with the elders and the seraphim and the whole of creation. We have to join in the song. And how do we do that? Romans 12. Romans 12. Verse 1 and 2. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. To the Greeks, the body was a prison. Brethren, the body, we're going to be resurrected with a body. The body isn't going to be hived off or thrown on the dump. We are going to have a body. The body we have now is a temple of the Holy Spirit. That body has to be a sacrifice, but a living one, not a dead one. And we worship God by being what He has given us gifts. See, Paul is saying, take your body, all the tasks that you have to do each day. Things you wouldn't think of as worship. Washing up the dishes, planting something in the garden, cutting the grass. Worship. Brethren, we are to take everything we do and present it to God. And that means, you do a job better. Because it's being given to someone. And it's being given to the one who matters, Jesus Christ. It may be work in the shop, the office, the factory, the mine. It may be listening to someone. But whatever it is, we have to put all of ourselves into it. And especially when we're gifted to do something. Maybe someone's a lovely voice. Do you use that? Nora plays the piano. She uses that gift. Morris tries to sing. God will help him improve. We all try, Morris. We all try. Yeah, but weeding, pulling a dandelion root out, if some people are weeding, and if you watch them, they cut the top off. And oh yes, I've weeded the bed. About a week later, you see the leaf, the dandelion growing again. You have to get down to the root. You have to do the job properly. Now, so cooking, whatever you do, offer it to God. That is part of your worship. Part of your worship. Can you listen well? Do you listen well to people? You're in a conversation. Or are you looking over their shoulder to see who else is coming in? And then you haven't heard what they said, and they say, what do you think of that? Oh, what was that again? We're like that. We're like that. Brethren, we need to have the big vision of God and realize that everything we are has to be presented to Him in worship. Even talking to a child. Did Jesus turn away? Did He think little children were not worth bothering about? He lifted one in His arms, didn't He? And He blessed and He said, suffer the little children to come unto me. The animals are precious too. The creation is precious. That's why God's going to renew it. I found a poem, and it was written by Francis Thompson. And a lot of his life was a failure. He was a one-time opium addict. He died of TB when he was, 48. And this poem, I'm not going to read it, it's too long, but God was calling him. And he felt that if he turned to God, he wouldn't be allowed to enjoy the things he wanted to enjoy. You know, people, ladies, food and drink and all the rest of it. And he immersed himself in things to escape from accepting God. And everything he turned to dust. Didn't work out for him. And eventually, it's called the Hound of Heaven. And it's about him fleeing God by getting involved in study and investigating nature and all the rest of it to try and escape from thinking about God. But God wore him down because he said every time something didn't work out for him, he knew God was still on his trail, because it describes it as with unhurrying chase and unperturbed pace, he could hear the footsteps of the Hound of Heaven coming after him. And at the end, God said to him, "Look, you have been trying to escape from my love," he said. But he said, "You think I took everything away from you and you wouldn't be able to enjoy things if you turned to me." But he says, "Take my hand," he says. "I have all those things for you at home," he says. "I would have given you all those things." Didn't he say that to David? "If you had wanted a wife or whatever, I would have given you those things." And God will give us. We needn't hide from God to escape what he wants us to do, to present ourselves in worship, because God will give us all the things we need and more. And in the kingdom, what did Jesus say? He who has left a farm or a home or a job for me will receive 100-fold in the kingdom. So, brethren, don't let our view of the Almighty Creator, of Jesus Christ, shrink into an idol. Think about why we worship God, why God deserves your worship. Fulfill the answer to, because what? Work it out in our own minds. Work it out in our own minds and give ourselves to Him. We don't need to fear anything. And the messy situations will work out. God will work them out.